So there you are, all ready to go out on a gig. You pick up your melody and you think, you must just have a quick try. Ah! Broken spring. Note sounds all the time. On the push, sometimes not on the pull because it'll close itself up due to the air pressure. So what to do? You need to go out and play, and you need it fixed now, and your local friendly fettler is not available. There's a quick fix and the long fix. I'll show you how to do the quick fix, which will get you out of the hole, and then I'll show you how to actually replace the spring. I'm kind of assuming that you've looked at some of my other videos, so know how to take the ends off your melodeon. You then need to take the grill off, two little twisty things, twist them till they're straight and the grill just lifts off, and then seek out the broken spring. Must admit this spring isn't actually broken, I've just disconnected it. But for a quick fix you need one of your Postman's cast off elastic bands, a paper clip in blue, and a couple of drawing pins, thumbtacks for our colonial brothers. First thing is to chop off a you want a small part of the paper clip, and then with a pair of pliers put a U shape in the bottom, and then at 90 degrees you want another U shape, so you end up with it in that sort of bent round S shape. Now, something that's going to be very difficult to show you with this camera, at the bottom there's probably not enough light. If you follow, that's the pallet of the broken one, there's the rod that operates it. If you follow it down you'll see where the broken spring is, and there's a hole in the arm. But if you take your bent paper clip and hook it through the hole, and then take the elastic band, hurrah! I now have an elastic band and a working pallet again. I then take the two drawing pins and just push them into the fondant. With a bit of spread to get some tension. And if we put it back together, nope, the right way out. We should now have a working melodeon. Etc. So despite what I showed you, a relatively easy fix. Carry a spare elastic band with you and it'll last for years. I've taken them out that have obviously been in there for ages when replacing the springs properly, but that will get you out of a hole. You can nearly always find the bits to do this. If you're in the village hall just ready for a ceilidh and this sort of thing happens, the notice board will have spare paper, spare drawing pins. Any bent bit of wire will do. I just use a paper clip because it's easy. And your local village postman will have dropped elastic bands all over the place. But I'll now show you what you should really have done. Right, to actually properly replace the spring, you will need to take the keyboard and the whole treble mechanism off. First of all, take the keyboard off. 2 screws inside, top and bottom. They are made out of cheese, so be really careful not to put too much twist on them because they will snap and then you're in a whole new place of pain. So there's keyboard taken off and you can see the floppity broken spring. We now need to take the whole treble mechanism out of the melodeon. To do that you have to take the tension off all the springs. I have a special tool, i.e. an old screwdriver, which I've ground a slot in the end of. And can we see the springs? There's the spring there, and we just have to unhook it. We just have to unhook it. And you work your way along the whole keyboard till all the keys are detensioned. So there's the whole keyboard detensioned. There are now 1, 2, 3, 4 screws you have to undo. They're very tiny. Again, the light's really bad today. Just trying to get it. It's fairly obvious which the screws are. They're only small. And the keyboard. And it's 4 small screws. There is the axle, which passes all the way through all the keyboard pallet action and holds the springs in place. We now need to withdraw that rod until we get to the broken spring. To make withdrawing the rod easier, I use a Tesco's breadboard. Oh, IKEA, sorry. And I screw the keyboard back down. Position it so the end of the axle is over the near the edge of the board, and then put a couple of the screws in. These screws are a genuine pain to get back in. I use a bit of reed wax in the slot of the screw. Which means the screw will stay on the screwdriver. They won't do it of their own accord because they're made of brass. There. So now they're securely mounted on the board. I should have pointed out before we screwed it down, and again it's going to be very difficult to see. This end of the axle has a point on it and is the end that needs to be pushed through, and so there's the pointy bit, is the way, so the axle has to go through in that direction. This end is blunt, and if you try and push the axle back through in that direction, you'll have all sorts of trouble. It does mean that if you have to replace this spring at this end, you have to take all the keyboard apart, which is a pain, but it will make your life easier if you do it this way round. So having got your keyboard securely mounted, get a pair of pliers, pair of suitable pliers, possibly no electrician pliers, and grab hold of the end of the rod. So I'm going to move off the edge of the table, and then start twisting and pulling, and slowly but surely the keyboard will come apart. Keep the parts in order. They are all possibly slightly different shapes. There's a spring. And then you just keep going until you get to whichever is your broken spring. We'll pretend it's this one here. And eventually you'll get to the one with the nominally broken spring. You then need to source a new spring. Charlie Marshall stocks them, but he's closed just at the moment due to the coronavirus. Your local friendly fettler may have them and be willing to part with a few. I've got loads because I break old boxes that are beyond repair. The other thing to note is there are two different sizes of springs. But the only time I ever use anything technical. So for the, what would be the G-row, 2.7mm, and for the D-row, 2.5mm. Doesn't sound a lot of difference, but it does make a difference. So it's best to get the right size. Putting it back together in the best Haynes car manual tradition is just a matter of undoing what you just did. But it's not as easy as you might think it is. What I tried to do is adjust it so the pointy bit is just poking through, which allows you to locate one side of the button, then push it through a little, fit the spring, pop my light back up, push it through, next one, and there we have all the springs back in action, all working. It can be worthwhile if you've taken this apart for the first time in ages and it's all rusty and horrible, to take the whole thing apart and to just wire wool the axle and remove any grime from the hinge parts. It'll just mean your melodeon will be slightly nicer to play. Don't ever spray it with WD-40. It's not even a lubricant, or 3-in-1 oil, or anything else. All that will do is make the action sticky and pick up, well, it used to be fag ash in the good old days, but dust and filth, and clag it all up. And then you'll end up having to come to me or one of my chums to have it all stripped down, cleaned, and it's a pain. So just don't do it. It doesn't achieve anything. Now it's just a matter of unscrewing this, putting it back in the box, which I'll do. And then now is a good time to give this end of the box a good brush out. Years of dead pubs. 1-inch paintbrush, best thing in the world for this sort of job. Drop the keyboard back in, line it up with the holes. Put the screws in. Again, a bit of reed wax makes life easier. Don't over tighten these screws, they're only very small screws, and you can, if you're a bit over enthusiastic, strip the threads in the wood, in the Fondo soundboard, call it what you will, and then you have to repair that, which you can usually get away with just some super glue in the hole to harden the wood up again. Now you need to reconnect all the springs. So, special spring tool, and it's just a matter of picking the spring up and putting it back behind its hook. There they all are. Again, I'm not sure that you'll be able to see. But for instance, this spring here is at quite an angle in that direction. So it's my preference, and I'm not sure that it makes any difference, just to go along and align all the springs so they operate more at right angles to the axle. Like I say, I'm not sure it actually does anything, but it appeals to my engineering sensibilities. So having done that, and to be engineeringly happy, just a matter of refitting the keyboard. Wiggle, wiggle. Find where you're hitting the screws. And I go back to my warning at the beginning of the video, be careful with these screws. Refit the grill. And put the end back on the box.